So hi, I'm Inish, and today I'll be talking about a really good comedy show that I feel has flown under the radar for long enough. And that show is Brockmire. This is one of my first videos, so first of all, thank you so much for watching. And right off the bat, let me just, throw the YouTube algorithm out of the window and instead try to create some kind of a personal connection here. So I just want to let you know that my idea with this channel is to share my opinion about the many TV shows and movies that I watch and explain what about them I liked and what I didn't like and justify what worked and just didn't work for me, which I feel is very, very personal. So please also let me know what you think of this show, and hopefully my experiences can introduce you to some new and amazing shows, at least in my opinion, and start some great discussions as well. And don't worry, I will try and keep the spoilers to a minimum, since I really want you to go and enjoy this show later if you haven't already. So, let's get started. First, how I came to watch the show. So lately I've had to do a lot of studying, and to break out the study sessions, I needed a fun, relaxing, and not very demanding TV show just to help me chill. This is easier said than done, since I've already watched many of the big known shows, and I'm not a big fan of very physical comedy, or what I like to call stupid and big comedy. So the search kind of began, and Brockmire ended up being the chosen one, because it had a pretty good rating on IMDb, 8, 4 seasons, about 23 minutes per episode, since lately I've been getting a bit bored of the 1-hour format, and also it's about a baseball broadcaster, and I tend to really enjoy sports shows. So it kind of seemed like a match made in heaven, and thankfully it did not disappoint. And I actually ended up binging the entire 4 seasons in a few days. So let's get into the show. Brockmire is a darkly funny comedy about Jim Brockmire, who was once one of the most popular broadcasters in baseball, but ended up losing it all after a drunken rant on air after having caught his wife having an orgy in his house. Yes, you heard that correctly. The show takes place 10 years after his fall from grace, with him reluctantly accepting a job in Morristown as a broadcaster for a local minor league team. Initially, I thought that the show was going to be about the town and the team and how all the characters were going to come together to make a great team and help the town. But as comedically stupid as the show can be, it's also very, very grounded and much more realistic than that. So the true focus of the show is actually Brockmire. I guess that I should have been clued to this by the title, but instead I was just surprised as the episodes progressed. So let's get into what makes this show great, and that is Brockmire. He's a flawed but very, very likable character, and the real hook of the show, with this very charismatic voice and persona. The inspiration behind the character actually came from the actor Hank Azaria's fascination with the generic baseball announcer voice. You may or may not know Hank, but you have more than surely heard his voice work, since he voices up to 30 frequent Simpson characters, and is just fascinated with voice work. In this instance, many years ago, he wondered what it would be like if a guy with this voice had a meltdown on air and said inappropriate things while still delivering the play-by-play smoothly. This idea then led to a Funny or Die short, which inspired the script, a movie that almost got made, and eventually the TV show Brockmire. And here we are. So as you can see, this idea has been long in the making. And I think that Azaria's personal involvement and input into the creative process makes the show much more concise and realistic. When you have someone that just cares about a character or a project that much, it just really shows on the final result. Azaria also believes that the show is in the best form it can be as a series, allowing it more time to develop the characters and the narrative, and it does that so well. He also believes that the contrast between the slow, relaxed atmosphere of baseball and the show's dark and chaotic comedy is a perfect mix, and I totally agree. And it's amazing how entertaining the broadcasting actually is, with a significant part of the show being Brockmire just broadcasting the games. And it just comes to show you how well written and acted the series is, that those moments are one of the highlights of the show, at least for me. And I think that they work even if you're not a baseball fan, which I'm not. But, correct me here if I'm wrong or if you think otherwise. But going back to Jim. So he's arrogant and self-destructive, but he's also funny, intelligent, and just really passionate about baseball. He's narcissistic, and yet at the same time, I could really respect his determination to rebuild his career and to win back the respect that he's lost. And I really, really wanted that for him. By initially making us feel for him by not only having Jim cheated on by his wife, but also having him publicly humiliated, we are kind of rooting for him from the get-go and ended up excusing a lot of his flaws. So just like Brockmire, we as viewers also need to understand he needs to change and stop feeling sorry for himself. Just retake control of his life and make better and more professional decisions. The whole show is about the evolution of one man. And in a lot of these 20-minute comedy shows, the only thing that usually matters is the laughs. Most characters are really, really very one-dimensional. And the one thing that I have just given up on is the one thing that this show actually has in spades. And that is character development. Initially, we have a Jim who blames everything in his life on his ex-wife and on his humiliation, and uses that as an excuse for his behavior and his addiction problem. And obviously, comedically speaking, it's just really funny watching his drunken encounters and his self-destruction. But as the show progresses, we start to see him come to terms with the fact that his flaws were already there from the start, and that he is responsible for the state of his life, that only he can now change his future. Brockmire's character development is a realistic and believable portrayal of how people can change over time. It's messy, difficult, and more importantly, it just takes time. And that leads me to another of the aspects where the show took kind of a big chance and nailed it, in my opinion, and that is the time jumps. Well, I already told you that the show starts with a 10-year time jump. But also, during the episodes, is very, very common some back and forth between times. The show is not set over a short period of time, with episodes as a continuum of one another, but instead, most of them are set quite a few weeks or even months apart, even within seasons or within an episode. So this show is about glimpses of a man's life, and they kind of handpick what moments to show you with whatever message they want to portray in that episode, without also losing sight of the big journey. In my opinion, they ended up taking it too far in the last season, because they take us 10 years into the future. My biggest problem here is that no show can actually predict the future, so every time that they try, it just feels kind of fake to me. There were just too many things that were too similar to now, and I understand that they were trying to be a bit political and reference how our society and our world are not going in the good direction, but it felt quite heavy-handed, and they could have done that now in our current time, instead of creating overly weird ads for euthanasia and climate change that just took time from the show and from the relationships and the dialogues that made the show great. Because of all of this, I feel like the only way that they kept me engaged was because of how much I started to care for the characters and this world in previous seasons, and so I would basically just watch anything just to have some more time with them. Very much like season 6 and 7 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and season 8 of Once Upon a Time. At least it served for me to not actually want another season, out of fear of them destroying it even more. Again, even though this show has definitely made a positive mark on me, there is another aspect of the show that I feel lacks a little bit, and that is the secondary characters. Not exactly their personality or anything like that, but with them we have the exact opposite of what we have with Brockmire. There is just no evolution at all during the seasons. The two secondary characters of the show are Jules, the smart and strong-willed owner of the baseball club, and Charles, a nerdy teen that cares absolutely nothing about baseball, but helps Brockmire with the broadcast. In season 1, we start great. It could be a bit of a cliché that Brockmire gets a romantic relationship with the female secondary character, and eventually a semi-fatherly role with the young character, Charles, but they do it in a very, very realistic way. Just like the characters, we begin to think that there is no way that Jules and Jim can have more than a sexual occasional relationship. But as the time goes on, at least for me, I was as surprised as they were that they were falling in love. And on top of that, I was also surprised at how well they fitted together and how natural the relationship seemed to be. Again, it's in relationships and dialogues that this show flourishes, and I'm also a big fan of the relationship between Charles and Brockmire. Initially, yes, it's very, very dysfunctional, especially in season 2, and a lot of the times, Charles is the one taking care of Brockmire. But again, it's real, based on both their personalities and past and their family relationships, and it ends up providing us with some of the best emotional moments of the show. And I just love that the creators were not afraid to show some real emotion when it was called for. So I will now get a little bit more into spoiler territory, so feel free to skip ahead to the next mark if you wish. Jim and Jules' romance just seemed to be one of those that we all love in stories, where these two characters just seem to have found a true and likely match. But obviously, Brockmire takes the cliches into real life, and it was just so on character that Brockmire ended up giving up on the relationship not once but twice in order to maybe get the chance to go back to the big leagues. For me, this was the moment that I decided this was a really good show, and that stood out from the normal superficial comedies. So even though these relationships are great, with Brockmire there is an evolution over the years, and with the other characters, especially Jules, not to mention all the minor secondary characters that for the most part are just really basic, there doesn't seem to be much of a change or growth, or at the very least, what little change there is not good. So for me, it didn't seem as realistic that the relationship between Jim and Jules would work out in season 4 after all the changes to Brockmire, and it didn't feel as effortless to me as it did like in previous seasons. So overall, the first 3 seasons of Brockmire are exceptional, and I highly recommend giving them a try. Just be prepared to be a little bit more skeptical about season 4. Finally, in case you've clicked on this video because you've already watched Brockmire, I want to try and finish the videos by giving you some similar recommendations that you may also enjoy. So really quickly, humor-wise, I think the most similar show that I can think of is Fleabag. And another comedy show that is also not afraid to sometimes be serious and emotional and is also sports related is Ted Lasso. The writing and character development in all the shows are amazing. And please, if you have any TV show recommendations for me, please leave them in the comments below, since I'm always searching for my next obsession. To finish off, I just want to personally thank you for watching. I'm still trying to figure out what's the best format and what to discuss and how deep to get into spoilers, so let me know what you would like to see me do in future videos.